Angry Sudanese protesters take to the streets after President Omar al-Bashir lifts subsidies on fuel products. The government's aim? To balance the budget. Will these protests gain momentum, and how much of a threat is this to the already embattled al-Bashir? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir has cancelled fuel subsidies. The move has sparked angry protests in Khartoum and two other cities, leaving several people dead. The government doubled prices for fuel and cooking gas on Monday in an attempt to balance its budget. Sudanese are not happy about soaring food prices, corruption, high unemployment and a lack of infrastructure. Despite austerity measures following the separation of the two Sudans, both countries have struggled to maintain economic stability. So let's take a look at Sudan's economy as it stands. It lost 3/4 of its oil production when South Sudan became independent in July 2011. Its economy shrunk by 4.4% last year. And while the majority of the workforce is employed in the agricultural sector, unemployment stands at 20%. More than 2 million people live in poverty, with an estimated 300,000 people not having access to food and water. Let's talk about this more with our guests in London. Abdullah Al-Azreg, Sudanese ambassador to the United Kingdom. Also in London, Paul Moorcraft, director for the Centre for Foreign Policy Analysis, and in Doha, Walid Madibo, founder and chairman of the Governance Bureau. Abdullah Al-Azreg, let me start off with you because we only have a limited amount of your time. Tell us what's happening right now with these protests and what you think has gone wrong.
Thank you for interviewing me first. In principle, I'd like to say that we in the government, in principle, accept protest. Our people in Sudan have every right, to protest against any measure that the government takes, especially, when it is affecting directly their livelihood. And I have to confess that my government has taken a real drastic and major measures that are, affecting the livelihood of the people. But the government, it has done this because it is a responsible government. It has to take, measures to reform the economy. We know that the measures are painful. We know that it hurts, and we can feel, how painful these measures on the layman on the street.
Yes, I mean, these measures are impacting the poor more than anybody else.
No, it is not. This is the, these measures are, reforms. In the past, we used to subsidize everybody. Subsidy was reaching, the rich and the poor, which is quite unfair. These new measures now, will scale back the subsidy from those who have, and reallocate it to the ones who have not. So it is, painful, but it is fair.
Okay, well, clearly, and I'm looking at pictures now of some of the protesters, they don't think it's fair. They've taken to the street. They also don't think the way that the police have treated them with tear gas, some people have died, is fair either. Why that sort of action?
Actually, protest is not prohibited according to our laws and regulations. But what is prohibited is the riot. Some of these people, are supported by the so-called Revolutionary Front, which is an armed opposition. These are armed opposition elements, and they are actually infiltrated the, some towns so that to invoke the protest and, and turn the protest to riot and looting. These elements have burned some private and public properties. They have set fire on gas stations and private shops of people and buses and these things. No responsible government would accept this kind of actions.
Okay, all right. This is
protests are all right.
against the backdrop, excuse me jumping in here again, of growing anger levelled against the government and the president. There was some sort of coup attempt at the end of last year. People are asking him to go. What is his grip on power at the moment?
What is what?
What is Omar al-Bashir's grip on power at the moment? I mean, is he feeling secure?
No, first of all, we have to remember that Omar Bashir is an elected president. He did not, it is true that he came to power through a coup, but this is more than 23 years ago. But now he is an elected, president, and he got the support of the overwhelming majority of the people. We have to go back to the justification of the measure that we have taken. We have to remember that Sudan, has borders with 5 countries, and these borders are huge and wide and very big. We don't have the capacity of guarding all these borders. We have discovered that 1 million ton of our gas oil is smuggled to the neighboring countries, and this is costing our economy $1 billion. We are also, this as if we are subsidizing our own economy and the neighboring economies.
Can I jump in here again? I mean, isn't the problem that Sudan wasn't prepared? It wasn't prepared to lose its oil revenues. It didn't seek outside investment at a time when it should have.
There is a problem with the international economy. There is an economic problem in all, the big group of countries. These are 6 European economies suffering from, economic hardships. Now, so the international economy in their turmoil, generally speaking. It is true that, because we lost the oil, we lost, a big chunk of our money that used to support our economy. We lost 1/4 of our petroleum products because of the secession of the South. This is, we cannot deny that. This is affecting our economy. But the measure that we have taken will reduce the smuggling of big quantities of, petroleum products, which means, saving and bringing business back to our own economy. And the measures that we have taken are not, all measures that should be taken, because we are taking consideration the negative effects of these measures on our own people.
Okay, I get that. Let me ask you one more question, because I do realize that you have to go. Is any of this, the protests on the street, likely to stop Bashir from going to New York, going to the UN? I know he's waiting for a visa from the US. Is he going to go, and why is he going?
There is no relation between the two matters. We are waiting for the visa, and the American government should, in accordance to the Charter of the UN or in accordance to the agreement of the host country, should give our president the visa so that he can proceed to New York. There is nothing about what's going on inside the country and the visa.
Why does he want to go to New York?
He will be going to New York.
Why?
Because he has to lead the Sudanese delegation that will represent Sudan in the General Assembly, just like any other president.
Ambassador Al-Azraq, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you talking to us here on Inside Story. Well, I'm going to bring in my other guests now to get some sort of comment from the ambassador. Waleed, what did you make of what he said and the government's viewpoint of what's happening on the streets right now?
Thank you, Jane. I think we have to put things in context. These riots happened immediately after the press conference that was held by the president. And unlike other times where he depended very much on his populist appeal, this time he approached the people with a very condescending tone and a very paternalistic appeal and spirit.
Why do you think there's a change in his tone? What do you put that down to?
I think he is very frustrated. He feels that He has a serious governance crisis. The country is at the brink of disintegration. There is probably going to be a power vacuum very soon. And I would want to say that the best of economic policies cannot function in a political vacuum. You do have a political vacuum. When we speak about elections, for example, the regime spared no effort to completely debilitate the civic society, knowingly that the civic society is the backbone of any democracy. So right there, you get rid of any chance to peacefully cause any alternation in governance. There is no transparency in governance. The regime is not accountable for one single penny. It is being said that $1 billion has been embezzled out of the country from the time that the regime has reached power. Now, I would want to just make very quick remarks about some of the things that he mentioned. I mean, speaking about political vacuum, he was asked by some of his co-opted journalists about the situation in the periphery, mainly Darfur, Kurdistan.
Okay, I'm going to jump in now quickly because you're raising quite a few points, and I want to bring in Paul and get your thoughts on the demonstrations and what's led to this, and if you see this leading to a power vacuum, as Walid suggested.
Well, what you're asking, is this the Arab Spring? Is this the revolution that's going to copy Syria or Egypt? And my answer is no. I haven't seen except on television, these riots in the last few days, but all I can speak from is the experience of decades of working in Sudan. And it seems to me that it's quite remarkably peaceful compared with what's happening in the neighborhood, because there's been sanctions, there's been a longest war in Africa, there's been the loss of most of their economy, the oil in the south, and fighting continuously on the border. It would be quite remarkable if there wasn't some ferment. And in that context, it's quite minimal. That doesn't mean that there's not a lot of dissatisfaction. But if the fundamental question is there going to be some sort of radical Islamist brotherhood type revolution as in Egypt, well, the answer is it already happened in 1989. You have an Islamist government in power, which came to power by a coup, as was mentioned. So in a sense, it's already done that. It's 2 or 3 decades on, and it's been a reasonably moderate government. I led an observer mission for the elections in 2010, and it was reasonably free and fair in the context of recovering from a long war. So I think you have to put it in context in the region and in the time span. That doesn't mean that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the president. He's been in power since 1989. It's said that he wants to go.
Excuse me, Paul. Do you think that's why he's so confidently aiming to go to the UN, to go to the States and to get his visa?
I think it's a very risky option. He's indicted by the International Criminal Court, and we've just seen countries' leaders, as in Kenya, being in the court and coming back for the crisis in Kenya. I think it's very risky of him to go. His position domestically is not that secure, not just the recent riots, but also the fundamental opposition to him, because the political parties in opposition are too weak, but the opposition to him lies within the intelligence and in the senior military. So it was his own people, as it were plotting against him, and there's been a near coup and some senior people in intelligence arrested. His position is not that strong. But, ironically, the ICC indictment made him much more popular with his own people. So, in a sense, the country has survived a great deal. And I don't see it. I mean, I think that the riots and the deaths, sad as they are, will probably blow over, because the country is it's not another Egypt. It's not another Syria. It has a sort of discipline. It doesn't have the religious disputes. It has greater cohesion. Partly because of the revolution happened in 1989. So I don't see an Arab Spring immediately.
Okay,
of course, I may be wrong, but that's my own opinion, looking at it in context.
But Walid, I mean, you can understand why the people there are angry. I mean, for the poor, they're going to be paying twice as much for fuel. they're going to be paying twice as much for their food.
I mean, there is no cushion. I mean, nothing was done to, I mean, in this so-called package of his. I mean, apart from this balancing of the budget issue, I don't see any structural or institutional factors that can positively influence the situation of the Sudanese economy. I mean, you do have a country that has been under sanctions for almost 20 years. You do have a president that is already under, I mean, he is already wanted by the ICC. You do have, I mean, anytime people speak about elections and Arab Spring, I mean, we are mixing orange with apples here. I mean, how could somebody say that Sudan had his Arab Spring 20 years, knowingly that this regime came with a coup d'etat? So when we speak about elections, even the most recent elections, that's the procedural aspect of the equation, but the substantive aspect of the equation was totally missing. And we're not, I mean, we're not talking about an Islamic revivalism here, nor is it needed. As a matter of fact, it is what brought Sudan most of the complexities in its politics. But I want to say something again. The tension is not along the x-axis. It's not an ideological tension. Sudan is not as highly polarized as it is now in Egypt. The tension is along the center and the periphery. And now when you speak about the periphery, you have to think of Darfur, Kordofan, and the rest of the nation that is being bombarded on daily basis by Russian aircraft, Antonov airplanes. I mean, the record has reached, from the time that this ethnic cleansing campaign started, 2003, the record for these Antonovs, I mean, going out and hitting the periphery has reached a total of 2,000.
I mean, it is quite extraordinary, Paul, what's happening in South Kordofan, Blue Nile and the Abyei region. I mean, all of these have not been addressed after the two countries split, Sudan and South Sudan.
It was a great tragedy that when the South voted for secession, the Abyei issue was sidelined, and the question of Kordofan and so forth was also sidelined. And I agree with the point that it's not so much ideological, although there are ideological issues in Sudan, particularly the ultra-Islamist around Hassan al-Turabi, who have been involved in a number of these uprisings, particularly in Darfur. But I would argue that there is a problem, the center versus the peripheries. So 1/3 of the country has gone the south, but Darfur has not been resolved yet. Nobody's saying that Sudan is easy. It has been a complex, conflict-ridden country. All I'm saying is that it's surprising, having suffered so much, that in fact, if you visit Khartoum and see the difference in the last 20 years from great poverty to there's been tremendous development, although it's not shared equally, but just nor is it shared equally. As the Mother of Parliament behind me, there's problems of equal distribution of wealth in Britain. And I might argue there's probably more food banks in England than there are in Sudan. So it's a question to put it in context. There's a lot wrong with the government, but I don't think we're seeing a revolutionary process at the moment.
Okay, well, it's good to get that context. Now, Sudan, of course, is no stranger to conflict. We've touched on some of the issues. And since 1997, the country has been under US-imposed sanctions, accused of supporting terrorism. In 2003, war erupted in Darfur between the government and armed groups. More than 2 million people were displaced and as many as 500,000 were killed. In 2005, a peace agreement to put an end to the war in the south was signed. The decision to have a referendum on the future of the south was agreed. In 2011, South Sudan gained independence, a massive blow to Sudan's economy as the south held on to the lion's share of oil production. Waleed, let's talk about Darfur. And the war is over, but the fighting continues. Already hundreds have been killed this year. Why has the situation continued to be so bad?
I think it's very simple, Jane. I think the government, despite of the genuine attempts by the regional and international players to help it, it has not try to help itself. Any time a peace agreement is signed, the government simply just won't comply. And there is a strategic concern here, because the government feels that the periphery, people of Darfur and Kordofan, they have already migrated to the north. The government thinks that, I mean, the danger is coming from the social Darfur rather than the geographic Darfur, from the social west of the country rather than from the geographic part of it. And all efforts are being made not only with, I mean, dragging its feet when it comes to implementing treaties, but even worse, every attempt is made to drive a wedge between the civic society and the rebel movements. The government has not spared any effort to cause all sorts of divisiveness among the rebel groups. And so you do have a situation where there is a power vacuum, and if that's the case, then any peace agreement would not be sustainable. If you look at the record, I mean, we have to look at the record, because some people, they like to adopt an observatory logic here. I want to give facts. I mean, from 2009, 13 of the most prominent international aid agencies were kicked out of the country. Now, if you look at the situation, the number of internally displaced communities, we still call them internally displaced communities, even though they went to Chad and they went to Central African Republic, and some of them went to the north. The number has increased from 1.5 million to 2 million.
Okay, you're talking about the impact and the regional impact it's having as well. Let me bring in Paul. I mean, Paul, you were saying that it's going relatively well in Sudan compared to what's happening on its borders, internally and externally. I mean, we've got the situation with Chad, considering that both sides are supporting fighters in both their countries. Of course, the long-standing issue with South Sudan, that hasn't gone away. They're still rather acrimonious towards each other, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't think we've got enough hours to explain the origins of the conflict in Darfur. It is highly complicated. Doesn't mean
let's
we
not go
can't
that
try
far
and
back.
solve it.
Let's talk about now.
And the original... No, but I mean, you've got a war that's been going on, you've got a massive amount of internal refugees, as has been said, and it's a peripheral problem. It's not so much an ideological problem, although the South has been stirring as well. Since independence, South Sudan has involved itself again in the Darfur war. So you've got multiple players causing conflict. The government as well has been extremely cruel and hard in its response on occasions, and the only time you've had some kind of settlement is when you've got external agencies coming in. I don't mean the African Union or South Africa, but the Chinese have actually helped as well, particularly getting the oil flowing from the south, and the Chinese played a useful mediating role in Darfur. So I don't think the situation is hopeless. What I keep saying is that in terms of the context of the region, where there's general chaos, in the central areas of Sudan, I think the riots must be put into context. It could spread dramatically. Maybe there should be another partition. We could blame the British. They invaded Darfur in 1960. Maybe we should have, Darfur should become independent. There are enough Darfurian independence people who might opt for that. Maybe
and
Sudan is still too big.
I know there's the desire there as well. I mean, certainly, you know, economic dividends would be enormous, wouldn't they, if there was peace on all sides?
We don't need to go into any historical arguments here. I mean, we did see 47 of these humanitarian agents being killed, 39 already kidnapped, and 71 kidnapped and 39 being injured, and that's from 2013. So we're not blaming the government. However, we are saying that the government is not doing enough to help the peace process and to help stop the drain, because the more that this blood drain goes on, the more the government will have to spend out of its budget to sustain these anti-rebel movements. And I think unless and until a comprehensive peace agreement, I mean a genuine comprehensive peace agreement is reached among all Sudanese people, the drain will continue, and inevitably the balance will kick into the favor of the periphery. I mean, there is this centrifugal tension
well,
that
let's
has
hope
been
they are all sitting up and listening. That is sadly the end of our show. Thank you very much to our guests, Abdullah Alaz-Reg at the top of the show, Paul Moorcroft and Waleed Madibo. And thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, please email your thoughts to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.